Okay, so we've been discussing, or we mentioned earlier, these two mitzvahs that are related to dust and ashes. The dust, the earth, mixed into the Sotah water, and the ashes used for the red heifer. And these two mitzvahs were granted to the Jewish people in reward for Avraham, who said, I am dust and ashes. That's the Gemara on its basic level.
So it's a mitzvah, it could be a mitzvah to make yourself
a Sotah. That's a good question. So that there are many mitzvahs. Well, it's an interesting point. Because both these mitzvahs are not mitzvahs that are required so much as they are circumstantial. Like, for example, classic example is divorce. Divorce is a mitzvah. The proceeding of a divorce is a mitzvah, one of the 613. But you're not commanded to get divorced.
No.
The mitzvah is, if you want to get divorced, here's the proceeding. And the same thing with the Sotah and the red heifer. You're not commanded to, actually, there are times when you're commanded to get impure for, let's say, a dead person where you have to. But ordinarily, you're not commanded to get impure.
Well, the Levites were.
In order, sorry?
The Levites were when they carried Joseph's bone.
Right. So there are times when there's a mitzvah to get impure. Like if someone in the family passes away, you're required to get impure, even a kohen, depending on the relationship and what level kohen. But there is sometimes a mitzvah to get impure. What I'm saying is, there's no mitzvah, thou shalt get impure, so that you can use the paraduma.
No.
It's right. It's if you want to get purified, you have to do the red heifer.
It's like tzitzis too, right?
Yeah, so this is a similar thing. If you have a four-corner garment, you have to put it on. But there it's a bit different. We have other reasons why we put it on every day. For the Shema, that's right. So there are many mitzvahs that aren't like tefillin, you have to put it on. It doesn't matter what happens. Prayer, you have to do no matter what. Shabbos, you have to do. But then there are certain mitzvahs that are circumstantial. Another example is returning a lost object. Or not returning a lost object, I'm sorry. Returning a stolen object is one of the 613 commandments. Obviously, you hope that you never have to fulfill this mitzvah in your life to return a stolen object. You don't want to get, like, there's no mitzvah, go steal so that you can return the object. So similarly, there's no real mitzvah that one has to go through the proceeding of the paraduma. It's if you want to get purified, you need to go through the red heifer business. Same thing with the Sotah. There's no, actually, we did discuss in the Gemara earlier whether you're commanded to, whether there's a mitzvah to warn your wife about hanging with other men, but there is no like mitzvah upon a woman that she should go hang out with another man so that she should end up going through the proceedings.
Right.
It's if she comes to the circumstance.
Conditional.
That's right. That's right, which is interesting. That's right. So this actually falls in line with what we were saying yesterday, that both of these mitzvahs indicate a humility to the point that the person is willing to give up on himself for somebody else's growth, right? The kohen who administers, the priest who administers the red heifer himself becomes impure, and the priest who administers the Sotah proceeding erases the name of God, which is a huge weight on his shoulder, but he's doing so for the sake of helping somebody else. So
that's why the blood covering
is not part of this. That's right. That's right. That's right. So this then would explain. It would make sense then that these mitzvahs are the kinds that aren't incumbent but only conditional. Meaning, it's true that when someone is in a negative place, you got to step up, even if it costs you a little bit, to help that person. But the other person isn't required to go to that negative place, that you have to do that for him. You know, meaning I'm not required to put myself in a position that I need other people's help.
It's kind of like a compensatory mitzvah.
That's right. If I so happen to be in a place where I need someone's help, I should go seek it out, and the other person will give it, even though it costs them their own whatever. But I'm not like required to put myself in that position, right? So maybe that's kind of what's happening. It's an interesting point, right?
So
okay.
If a parent dies,
Mm-hmm.
he's a kohen, and the son has to be with him.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he can't go into the temple until he does the red heifer.
Yeah. How do you affect that? So
can't. When Mashiach comes, we will. Can't.
But he's becoming impure.
That's right. It is a mitzvah for him to become impure, and he does have to go through the red heifer if he wants to go into the temple. But theoretically, a person can go through his whole life and never do the red heifer and never violate anything. In theory, let's say a kohen lives to 180 years old, and his son lives to 120. So the son dies before his father. right? But he said never has to do the red heifer. Let's say in theory.
Even for Pesach, he's not impure.
But it's possible in theory for a person to go his entire life and never become impure.
Oh, never to become impure.
Right? It's not a mitzvah that you have to do. There cannot be a theoretical human being who's not obligated to wear tefillin. Theoretical Jewish male. There's no such thing as a Jew who's not obligated in Shabbos. But there is such a thing as a Jew who theoretically can go through life without being obligated to do the red heifer. Theoretically.
Yeah, he never becomes impure.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's not a mitzvah. It's a conditional mitzvah, right? It's the circumstances, if circumstances which are very likely to be that you require that, this is the mitzvah, right? Okay.
So if the coin buries his father,
Mm-hmm.
the coin becomes impure.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he's got to go through
The red heifer. Yeah.
What do you do now?
So nowadays we don't do anything. I mean, most of us are all impure, and which is why one cannot go into the Temple Mount beyond a certain point. Because beyond a certain point in the Temple Mount, that's right. Because the sanctity of the temple still exists in the Temple Mount, even though the temple isn't there. And beyond a certain point, all of us who are impure on multiple levels, we could not, on the highest being coming in contact with the corpse, because we've all been to funerals and we've all been to hospitals, we couldn't enter beyond a certain point in the Temple Mount. But you should know that what?
Sorry, I think that was discussed in last week's Rambam.
The one chapter day.
Yeah, the one.
It could be,
sorry,
yeah.
the one
Yeah.
chapter About the levels of sanctity.
In the temple.
As you go farther west,
So yes, the Holy of Holies.
What you can and cannot do in each level. It's pretty interesting.
That's right. There are many who would actually avoid the Temple Mount entirely because of it. I even saw one source that talked about when putting notes into the wall to be careful not to put your finger into the wall because then your finger's entering Temple Mount. I even saw one source. I don't know if you have to get that far, but there is such a thing. But I was going to say though that we should know that even if a kohen is already impure by coming in contact with a corpse, he's obligated to avoid doing that again. I mean, even though we're all technically impure, one should not say, "Oh, I'm impure, so I can go to a cemetery." It makes a difference anyway. No, a kohen has to avoid. That's right. A kohen has to avoid making himself impure, even if he already happens to be impure.
Which most people are, right? You mentioned once, if you're born in a hospital.
We pretty much all are. We pretty much all are to one degree or another.
Another question I can't understand. Why was it so important to have mikvah in those days, and now it's not that important?
It is important, for example, for women.
Yeah,
to do mikvah.
I'm talking about men.
For men, because there are other impurities, right? Bodily fluids that come out or whatever. But most of these, because the ritual impurity, the impurity and the purification, for the most part, is with respect to going to the temple. We're not going to the temples; it becomes less important, right? Ezra, the scribe, the one responsible for rebuilding the second temple, he wanted to enact that anytime there's a seminal omission, one should not be allowed to study any Torah or read prayer unless they've gone to mikvah. Now the end is that because the people could not keep up with such a demand, meaning not just the seminal omission without one's wife, meaning even with one's wife, even through proper intercourse, you still have to go next morning to the mikvah before they read Shema or learned the Torah. And it was too much for the populace to handle, so that was lifted. Many still try to keep to it, but in theory, that would have been the only reason to have mikvah for men on a very strong level. But nonetheless, before Yom Kippur, at least everybody goes to mikvah. Because at least before Yom Kippur, you want to keep that standard where you're not going to go into Yom Kippur without first purifying yourself from the last year of even proper seminal omission. Right?
So, if a man,
but for women, it's still biblical.
Let's say I have my age. Let's say I have a seminal omission. Okay.
One who has one, yeah.
One who has one
in
those days.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's the one who makes the 10th person for a minion.
Yeah.
What happens to the minion?
They have to wait for him to go to mikvah.
They don't know. He keeps it to himself.
Hey, they don't know. That might be part of the reason why people couldn't handle it, and then just that decree fell by the wayside. But there are those who still keep to it. The reason why Hasidim go to mikveh every day is for that, combined with just in general, they want to have a higher purity, start the day with extra purity.
Could it also be for snooze reasons they go every day? Because if you see someone gone, then you may have a presumption, why are you going?
That could be part of it, yeah. That could be part of it, yeah. The person who goes every day, you don't know what they did and when and what they did when. But if someone goes only at certain random Tuesdays, might raise suspicion. That could be part of it, yeah. That could be part of it, yeah.
If I haven't gone in a month because of my leg.
Yeah. Yeah, don't go if it's gonna. Anyway, okay. So, having discussed that in the merit of Avraham's calling himself, I'm dust and ashes, his humility, we got these two mitzvahs related to dust and ashes. The Gemara now tells us of another event in Avraham Avinu's life, as a result, that resulted in us, his progeny, meriting a certain mitzvah. So let's see. Dorash, where am I? We're in 17a. And if you go to the bottom of the narrow set of lines, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, second to last word, Dorash. You see it? Okay. Dorash Rabbi. Rabbi expounded. Rabbi gave the following sermon. Eschar sha'amar Avraham Avinu, in reward for the fact that Avraham Avinu, Abraham our forefather, said, Im yichut v'ad shruch now. He said as follows to the king of Sodom. This is the famous battle. The Torah gives a whole backstory with a bunch of kings that rebelled against Sodom. And then in that rebellion, they took Avraham Avinu's nephew, Lot, captive. So Avraham invaded to retrieve his nephew. So the king of Sodom came, because Avraham Avinu basically just overthrew the people who conquered him, came to him and said, okay, give me back all the stuff I lost. So Avraham said, I swear by Hashem that I haven't taken a shoestring or a sandal strap. Like I haven't touched anything that doesn't belong to me. So this is like an extreme honesty, right? Not even theoretically, beyond the letter of the law, honesty.
Not Abraham.
Yeah.
No, I know.
No, he's saying that by law you can take a loot from war if it's a legit war. It's right, but Avraham Avinu did not. Right? Let's just assume that's correct and say this is beyond the letter of the law, honestly. Right. So as a result of that, Zachu, the Abanav, his children, us, Jewish people, merited Lebei's mitzvahs, the two mitzvahs that are related to straps and strings. Chut shel tcheles, the string of the tzitzis, referred to as tcheles. There are two parts to the mitzvah of tzitzis. One is the blue string, called tcheles, and one is the white strings that we have, the tzitzis. For whatever reason, we don't have the tcheles. We're not going to get into that at the moment. But essentially, it's the string of tzitzis, one of which ought to be blue. We don't, because until Mashiach comes, we're not 100% certain as to what the blue is. There are those that claim that they do know what the blue is. And that's why you'll see some people with the blue string. But for now, we'll leave it. So Avraham said he's honest to the point of not taking a shoestring, and therefore we have a mitzvah related to strings, tzitzis. And Avraham said, I'm honest to the point of not taking a strap from the shoe, and therefore we have mitzvahs related to strap. Namely, which mitzvah do we have? Tefillin. Tefillin, the straps of tefillin. Okay, this is the end of Rava's teaching. So the Gemara now says, following the same principle we said yesterday, these mitzvahs that we're getting as a reward from Avraham Avinu are the kinds of mitzvahs that cause growth to the Jewish people, where the Jew grows and gains as a result of these mitzvahs, right? Like we said last time, the dust of the Sotah brings peace to the home. The sprinkling the ashes brings purification, which is why the covering of the blood didn't qualify. Yeah, what do you want to say?
Where does the king of Sodom, whatever there, get the permission to ask Abraham for all his stuff back?
He's hoping.
Oh, he's hoping.
Seems like he's hoping. He gives him a whole praise, blesses him, praise your God, and
But he just conquered him, overthrew him.
He conquered the conqueror.
Right. So Abraham, you would think, would have demands on him, not the other way around.
In theory, yeah. So, I guess Avraham Avinu's honesty was repute. He wanted to look up the verses there. It's an interesting chapter. It's a small chapter. It's an interesting chapter. It's in chapter 14 in Genesis. Can I have a look?
There's also controversy whether he went in himself and defeated the whole army, or
Well, the verse there says he has servants, but there's a discussion about that. Yeah, there's Rashi comes in. Yeah,
I was going to say, all these nations highly respected Abraham, so
absolutely.
they knew he was a diplomatic in character, so they probably approached him in that sort of way, even though they
he begins by praising him. He begins by he begins by praising him and praising God, and then says maybe, perhaps, it's like a whole.
It's going to be part of his business with them.
Yeah. Anyway, so the Gemara wants to know where's the gain, where's the virtue that the Jewish people gain by the tefillin and the tzitzis. So says the Gemara, when it comes to the strap of tefillin, there's a great gain. Why is that? Tiksiv, because the verse reads, V'ro kol amei haaretz, all the nations of the earth will see. This verse is in Devarim, that is Deuteronomy 28:10, where there it says, V'ro kol amei haaretz, and all the nations of the earth will see, Ki Shem Hashem nikra lecha, that the name of God is written upon you. And the verse goes on to say, they will fear you. Tanya, we learned, Rabbi Lezer the Great says, what is the meaning of this verse which says that the name of God is written upon you? Elo tefillin shebarash, this refers to the tefillin that's on the head of the Jewish people. That a head that wears tefillin brings the respect of God on the face of the one who wears it, and thus the enemies become afraid. This line, just before we continue the Gemara, this line, which is quoted elsewhere in the Gemara as well, not just here, the Rebbe quoted when he began the tefillin campaign. The tefillin campaign, as many of you I'm sure know, began in 1967, when there was the scare and they thought that Israel was over, another Holocaust is coming, wipe out, there's going to be millions of deaths. And the Rebbe declared publicly, no one has to worry. This is one of those areas where, like, straight up Rebbe prophecy, documented on the books, Rebbe prophecy, literally straight up. The Rebbe prophesied that everything's going to be okay, and not just prophesied everything's going to be okay. He gave the means for that blessing. Began a tefillin campaign and said all Jews should wear tefillin, especially soldiers, because of this verse, because of this Gemara. The Gemara says that a head that wears tefillin, the nations of the world are afraid. And thus, if the Jewish people wear tefillin and the soldiers wear tefillin, the nations will be afraid. And this is indeed what happened. Famously, especially in the north, when the Syrians invaded, at some point, inexplicably, because they completely outnumbered the Israeli soldiers that were positioned in the north. Nonetheless, they literally ran away. So they ran so fast to the point that they left their boots behind because they wanted to run faster. Their boots are too heavy.
It almost sounds like a biblical story.
It's the miracles of the 6-day war is of biblical proportions by any standards. Read it, read the history, and the Rebbe's statements are documented on the books, on video. Famous like Rebbe parade, the Rebbe screams this thundering speech, like the prophet thunders. Jewish people find themselves in a situation. God's going to protect them, and you Jewish people, by you guys studying Torah and doing this, is how the God's protection is going to happen. And the whole world's looking like, and Rebbe asked that his words be published in papers in Israel. No one should leave Israel because it's safe. Who takes it upon their shoulders to say that? When there's how many armies, hundreds of thousands of soldiers ready to march to his death, and Rebbe's taking on his shoulders. Everybody stay in Israel, you're going to be fine. But this again in 91, the Gulf War too. Anyway, this verse, this idea that the tefillin brings protection to the Jewish people is something that we used, and we saw it literally during the 6-day war. So here's the gain that we get out of the mitzvah of tefillin. Okay, so when Avraham Avinu is honest to the point of saying, I haven't taken even a strap of a leather, we get the mitzvah of the straps of leather tefillin. There's a major gain, protection, 6-day war saved. But the Gemara continues. You want to comment something?
Yeah, there's a movie about that.
Yeah.
That shows it shows three miracles that happened, and it's called 4 blood moons or 5 blood moons, and it's about the
6-day war.
The 6-day war, and it's unbelievable. What 2 guys were completely behind a rock, and a whole regiment of soldiers were coming at them, and these 2 guys thought they were finished.
Yeah.
And the trucks came and they were all pointing their guns at these 2 guys, and nobody shot.
There's inexplicable stories like this where people they literally just ran, like the verse says, literally.
What happened is all their guns blocked. hundreds of soldiers,
It-
all their guns blocked.
insane stories around the 6-Day War.
And these two
insane
guys
stories.
brought hundreds of soldiers into the camp.
Yeah, my
Insane
father-in-law-
stories.
Father-in-law had this, I remember a story, he said.
Oh, your father-in-law was fought then.
Yeah, he had a.
So he remembers
had this Jeep.
he remembers the Chabadniks coming to the front line to put on tefillin. He'll tell you stories about this.
But
The
he-
Chabad was going crazy then with the tefillin.
Yeah.
Like yeshiva shut down, it was full-time tefillin.
Yeah.
he
Wow.
went-
They were
he
running on the
went-
streets.
He
They
puts
were-
it on every day,
Since then.
since he was a kid, but I'm saying.
So Chabad, these guys were going down to the front lines, putting tefillin with soldiers. I mean, it was a crazy time.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway,
Right.
sorry.
There's a little story. So he had a few soldiers, friends, whatever you call it, in the Jeep, and they took a break, they stopped, they pulled over, they got 5 guys, I think, and they went just to leave the Jeep for a few minutes, and they had their weapons, machine guns, whatever, in the Jeep, and when they were approaching back to the Jeep, the enemy was right there right near the Jeep with all their weapons and stuff. They thought, forget it, we're done. We don't have any arms on us. And for some unknown reason, the guy just put his hand up and surrendered. Just like, and he couldn't understand it. But
Crazy stories like this.
This movie shows the whole thing. 4 blood wounds or 5 blood wounds.
So you're saying that there was no Seder in yeshiva? I mean, where the Seder was closed and just go to the.
You're talking about time of war.
Right, true.
It's the entire country was in war.
Right.
Either you were putting on tefillin with other people, or most actually, the Bachar, anybody, any human being in Israel,
Right.
any Jew in Israel split his time between feeding his family,
And
putting on tefillin, and building bunkers to save people.
right.
There's nothing else to do. That was it.
yeah.
Anyway, you have a look up. Okay, sorry? Sorry?
It was outrageous what he did. I mean, who would ever believe?
Never asked his word be published in Israel. He wanted his speech to be recorded and played on the radio in Israel. It made international news.
I know.
Everybody thinks Israel is going to go to you know where, and the Lubavitch Rebbe says everything's going to be fine. It's like, who is this guy? That's what happened. It's incredible.
We did a tour of Egypt once.
Rebbe was actually very upset then afterwards that the Jewish world did not capitalize on the inspiration to inspire more Jews to return to Judaism, because people were like, it's like biblical proportion miracles. Jews were walking on the street waiting to connect. And you ask Hasidim who were then at the time, they had people lining up waiting to put on tefillin with them. Standing on the street with a pair of tefillin and a line, people waiting to put it on. Like the Jewish world was in crazy.
Yeah.
The Rebbe referred to it once in a Maimer as, the prophecy that says it could be the sound of the great shofar and it's going to bring the Jews in. The Rebbe referred to the 6-Day War as part of that call, the shofar, causing Jews to come back. And the religious leadership did not step up as much as they should have, as much as they wanted them to. It was a moment when Jews were ready to commit, ready to reconnect. Many did, and it's still growing, but it was certainly a moment that could have been capitalized even more.
We were on a tour of Egypt, and the tour guide somehow was talking about the wars and everything. And somebody said to the tour guide, "Why don't you just go and invade Israel?" And the tour guide looks at him. He looks at us because he knew we were Jewish. Summary. And he says, "Are you crazy?" He says, "They wiped us out last time in 3 days."
Yeah.
Interestingly, they have a shrine in Egypt where they talk about their victory in the 6-Day War.
Oh, really?
Whenever the Palestinians or the Egyptians or the Arabs come
Well,
to say how they won.
Their victory was a negotiation, not in war. But anyway, it's another story. Anyway, that's not for now. Okay, so let's conclude the Gemara. Let's continue. So the Gemara says, okay, so this is the gain in tefillin. This is the gain that got in reward for Avraham Avinu's honesty. We got tefillin, and this is the gain. But elachut shel tcheles. But when it comes to the string of the tzitzis, mahi, what's the gain? Where's the what are we getting out of this? It's just tzitzis. What's the plus side here? Where's the big reward here that we're getting in honor of Avraham Avinu's honesty? So it says the Gemara like this. Tanya, we learned in the Mishnaic H text. Rabbi would say, Manashtana tcheles, why was blue chosen? Manashtana meaning like what's different, right? Manashtana on the Friday night of the Seder. Manashtana tcheles, what makes tcheles different? Become minate tzivonin from all the colors. Hashem says to make blue. Why not green? Why not red? Purple? What's blue special? So explains Rabbi Meir. Because the blue looks like the water. The yam and the water looks like the heavens. And the heavens is similar to God's throne of glory. Shenemar, as the verse reads, by Yiru Yisrael, and they saw the people. This is a reference. This is a verse in Shmois, but it's a reference to the Jews' vision at Mount Sinai. They saw the God of Israel, the Tachas Raglav, and under God's feet. So all anthropomorphic, not to be taken literally. Kemaisa livnas asaper, like a sapphire stone. Uke'etzem hashamayim l'taher, and the sapphire stone looked like the essence of the heaven in its purity. It's pure blue. Okay, so again, the blue looks like the ocean looks like the heaven looks like the throne of glory. How do we get to the throne of glory being blue? Because we see that the sapphire stone upon which God's feet rested looked like the heavens. Okay, and the verse says elsewhere in Ezekiel that the throne of God looks like the sapphire stone. So we have blue to the ocean, ocean to the heaven, heaven to the sapphire stone. Sapphire stone looks like the heaven, and the throne of glory looks like the sapphire stone. A lot of things were moved. So, sorry?
God liked the sapphire.
Yeah, whatever that is.
Because he told Moshe, there's sapphire under your tent. And the stones are made in sapphire.
Yeah, so something about, obviously it's very mystical, and I'll just point out one thing which indicates that we're talking about something mystical. He says like this: the blue looks like the ocean, and the ocean looks like the heaven. Why not just say the blue looks like the heaven? Skip the ocean part. Why do you have to say that the blue looks like the ocean, and the ocean looks like the heaven? Just say the blue looks like the heaven. Hold on a second, what? Yeah. Come. What's the next touch here? Okay, yeah. Okay. So, right, so the Gemara said that the blue is compared to the ocean and the ocean compared to the heaven. Why not just say the blue is compared to the heaven? Why we... So
yeah, but even, I think it's also more impressive saying that the heavenly throne is blue.
It's obviously metaphorical. It's not literal.
I would think it would be like gold. And that's what it's
Ezekiel saw it.
All to say that this is very, in some sort of spiritual vision, right? All to say, I'm just saying that this is metaphorical, and I think what he's trying to say is how many levels of, we learn about in Chassidus about Seder Hishtalshalos, right? In the chain of divine energy. The divine energy comes in the first world, it's the most potent, and then it gets diminished and diminished and diminished and diminished. So each of these levels, I think, refer to a level of diminishment. Right? Ocean to heaven, to sapphire, to God, the footrest of God's throne, to God's throne itself. I think they're levels of climbing up the ladder. Yeah, it's climbing up the ladder. And that's where all these steps are necessary. I don't know what they are and exactly what they mean, but that's what I think has happened. Okay, so what's the point here the Gemara is trying to say? That because this is through climbing up the chain ladder is connected to the very throne of God. So anybody who wears tzitzis, it's as if he receives the presence of Hashem. He's bringing in the presence of Hashem into his life. That's the tzitzis. And that's why this is the reward. So what do we have here? What do we have here? Okay, so the Gemara basically said that Avraham Avinu's his honesty was expressed in the fact that he said, I haven't stolen a string or a strap. Therefore, we had two mitzvahs, strap and string of tzitzis. And what we get out of that is receiving the presence of Hashem. And the strap of tefillin, we get the respect of the nations that they're afraid of us. What's the relationship between this and honesty, which is what Avraham Avinu said himself? Right? Don't forget to make a bracha. All right. So what do we get out of that? What does it mean? What's the lesson here? So perhaps it's as follows. Yesterday we talked about Avraham Avinu saying, I'm dust and ashes, and his humility. The true test of humility is honesty. If I'm truly humble and I'm aware that everything I have is a gift from God, then why would I have to cheat? What underlines cheating is a lack of trust that Hashem provides. That's why I have to cheat, because I think I need to scheme to get. Right? In fact, that's what Avraham Avinu says. Rashi tells us that when Avraham Avinu says that I haven't taken anything. He says, because God promised me wealth. I don't need to steal from you to get my wealth. Right? So there's the essence of humility is expressed in an honesty. Now, when a person is very honest, the person could be scared of two things. He might be afraid that if I'm so honest, I'm going to get run over by other people. Says the Gemara, no. Honesty is like the tefillin. And the end is you get respect from people. That's what happens. People in the business world, people know this. Everybody, oh, that guy's an upstanding guy. I'll do business with him any day. So in the short term, person feels like the honesty is to my own detriment. Oh, I'm so honest. I could have got that extra money and I didn't get it because I was honest. But at the end of the day, you want to respect the people around you. Honesty is the way to go. The tefillin. The tefillin has this effect on other people. They respect, they fear you because they know this is an honest and upstanding man. And then the Gemara continues, and even if you don't get the respect of others, in the presence of Hashem with you. So you're willing to exchange the presence of Hashem for a couple of extra dollars? What are you doing? This is perhaps the Gemara's message. Avraham Avinu's honesty leading to the tefillin, which causes the respect of the nations, and tzitzis, which brings the presence of Hashem into our lives. This humility that we began with, Avraham Avinu says, I'm dust and ashes, morphs into Avraham Avinu's honesty, not taking a shoe or a strap that doesn't belong to me, 100% honest. And that honesty leads to A, the respect of everybody else, and B, inviting the presence of Hashem into our lives. This is perhaps the underlying message here in the Gemara.
Avraham was very wealthy.
Avraham Avinu was very wealthy. Yeah.
Despite the fact that he was because.
I'll conclude with a practical story of this demonstration of this. A story with my father's father. I like to repeat the story. So I may have said this story before. But essentially, my grandfather was born in Australia. So he didn't go through the war. And of course, they found out about the war only after. They found out about the Holocaust only afterwards. And then Jews started to emigrate away from Europe all over the world, including Australia. And they would land in Melbourne. And my grandfather would go to the docks, the young man, and find Jews who came off, had nobody, did nothing, and say, come with me, come to my house. I'll take care of you guys. My grandfather and his father took care of many immigrants who came in, staying in their house, getting them married, getting them work. And what my grandfather would do is he would go with these immigrants to the bank and co-sign for them to get a loan, to get started, whatever they needed. He would co-sign for them. Okay, that's it. End the story. Fast forward 30-something years, I don't know how long, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. And my grandfather's already in business and his business is growing, thank God. And he's on a vacation with my father and his brothers, with his sons and his daughter. And one of my uncles broke a toilet in the house they rented. So my grandfather called the owner and said, I want to pay for the toilet. So the owner told my grandfather, I rented this house many times. No one's ever called me to pay for something they broke. They always try to hide it. Such an honesty. I'm a bank manager. Whatever bank you are with, come to me and I'm going to give you a better rate. Okay, so grandfather's all excited, he switches. But what happens is the new bank he goes to, only gives him a month-to-month line of credit.
Oh, okay.
Which in his line of business is it's month-to-month in the sense that he has to pay back at the end of every month.
Oh, okay.
Which is like
credit card.
It doesn't really help for a business guy.
Right.
He's got to take much, especially he's importing textiles. He takes a longer time. Right? So he's stuck. The new line of credit is not helpful. He's not going to go back to the old bank. He feels embarrassed. So what do I do now? The end was he starts going to different banks. But he can go to the office down the hall. Yeah. So he starts going to different banks to try to find something, and he does. He comes to one bank and he's talking to somebody, and then essentially the manager comes out and says, "Your name is Max Noon?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Are you the guy who used to sign for all those people who came off the boat?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Whatever you need, you got it here." Give him, and that's his banker till today. What happened was this manager worked in the bank earlier as a young clerk, whatever it was, when my grandfather was signing all his papers. And he was mind blown. There's one guy who's signing for stranger after stranger. This guy's amazing. And 20 years later, he said, "This is the guy who took it on his shoulders to help all these Jews. I want this guy as a client, and whatever he needs, I'm going to give him." until today, this is where my grandfather's in bank. This is where my grandfather is turned, thank God, before Yom Kippur 95 or 94, he just turned. Thank God. He's still taking a walk every day for an hour. And he goes to Kollel every morning since he retired to learn. Yep. Every day for a few hours he goes to learn since his retirement. Which one?
The wool one.
The wool?
Yeah, that my father said.
Oh, that was his father. Yeah, that's a different. Maybe I'll say that story at a different time. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so this is the story of the honesty that at the end of the day pays off because everybody ends up respecting, knowing, oh, that's a guy I'll do business with because he's honest, he's straightforward. I know that when he says it. Thank God I've been blessed on both sides. They have that reputation. I hope to be able to continue that. Okay, have a wonderful day, everybody. A good Merry Shabbos.